AMC's Interview with a Vampire, for me personally, has been a very mixed bag. Some elements I've loved, some elements I've definitely not loved, and I want to talk about it here. I made a video last year on this channel that was purely on my speculation and my initial reaction to it, and that's attracted a lot of comments, but I want to talk about my opinions of the series and what's happened and how it seems to have gone so far. So, first things first, what is it? It's an adaptation of Anne Rice's Interview with a Vampire novel from the 70s. The wonderful Louis goes to tell his life story to a young journalist, and then we go from there. The key events from his life are fleshed out from his time as a human and as a vampire. Now, I want to get what I like out the way with this show. I think the writing is on point. I like the characterization. I like the overall atmosphere. I like the tone of the show. I mean this in a complimentary way. It probably has more in common with like an adult version of the Vampire Diaries or the originals than a Interview with a Vampire. Don't go in this expecting the Anne Rice novel. But this is where my criticism starts. It's missing something with Anne Rice. They've moved the timeline forward, which I find absolutely ridiculous. I wish they'd just kept the timeline where it was. I think it would have been more interesting. And it's fairly recent in history, so it kind of loses some of its mysticism. I also don't like the portrayal of Claudia. I get aging her up. I do. I completely understand that because you don't want a kid running around a horror set. But I think Kirsten Dunst did it so much better in such a more charming way. She's kind of missing that cruelty, and that's also what this show is missing. It's missing that beautiful cruelty that Anne Rice can write, that almost gothic notion of suffering that predominantly tends to be more taboo in modern television series and adaptations. I hate to mention this again, but this is far superior to The Rings of Power in terms of writing, editing, structure, acting, and many other things, and it actually shows how an adaptation can be done. But on the flip side of that coin, I think messing with Anne Rice's work is an interesting idea. They also started with the wrong book. They should have started with the events of the Vampire Lestat. Simple reason, that serves as both a prequel, a midquel, and a sequel to Interview with a Vampire. You could easily combine the stories together and create a cohesive season, and one season that doesn't rely so much on original characters and original settings created specifically for the show. They've changed the rules of the vampire in this. I don't particularly like they've changed the rules. I don't know why they decided to do that. And again, the gothic cruelty of Anne Rice's work is missing. It's missing that tone, and although she served as executive producer on this, let's be real, I think it was very much in name only. That's the rumour anyway. Her son was fired, but I cannot confirm that story, so we'll see what comes out over time. A beautiful adaptation that tells very much its own story and just uses elements of Anne Rice's novel. Ultimately, the problem is, without that gothic beauty, without that gothic suffering, it's lacking. On terms of story structure, I think it's handled very well, but I wish they'd just gone to a slightly more interesting time in history, gone to the original timeline, a bit further back. I don't know why they decided to bring it forward. I have theories, but I don't know why they decided to. I think in structure this has the makings to be a good show, but I wish in the thing it didn't say Anne Rice's Interview with a Vampire. it said, inspired by Interview with a Vampire. Very little of the novel is represented, but also the fact that I do like this show. I'm actually enjoying it. But I will say that I am enjoying it. I think the actors are really pulling their weight here. They're really showing some guts. But it's taken away what makes Anne Rice's novels so special, so beautiful. It's taken away that cruelty and suffering, and it's taken away that kind of her voice from the work. Lestat is basically her husband, and a character that has literally been to hell and back. Literally. And I feel like they could have done some very interesting things with him, where he feels more superfluous in this story, where really, like I said, they started with the wrong book. The characterization is good, and I think he does it very well, but oddly enough, this is far more gory than Anne Rice's novel. It will be interesting with season 2 because, and I say this, Lestat won't be a rock star. Lestat won't be the brat prince. He won't be that in this, so I don't know how they're going to adapt. I'm presuming they're skipping most of the vampire Lestat, and they're going with the Queen of the Damned, and we all know how that movie ended. We pretend that movie didn't really happen. That's a thing. I think it does it very well. And that's the problem here. It's actually a good vampire show, but as an adaptation of a brilliant novel, it falls flat. It loses that voice that makes the novel so special. I also will point out, they kind of, and I mean this, they've kind of softened a lot of the themes of the novel. Because they've moved it forward, because they've taken some of the more gothic horror out of this, it feels disconnected in some parts. You recognise a character, but then the character feels disconnected from what they're presenting on screen. So it's very much a mixed bag. As a television show, I would give it a firm 6 out of 10. I'm enjoying it. I like the writing. I think the actors are brilliant. But as an adaptation, I would probably give it a 1. It has the bones of the story, but it's missing the feel of it. I think they could have moved it forward. They could have done this alternative timeline thing very easily with keeping the feel of the book. They've also removed some of the air quotes more problematic, I hate that word with a passion, it's a weasel word, elements, which feels like they've intentionally gimped it. If you've ever read Anne Rice, her writing carries a beauty. It's lyrical. It's full and rich. She comes from a very classical sense. This is missing that. And I can't quite put my finger on it, but I'm willing to give this one a chance. Will season 2 be better? Will they start pulling their ideas together? I've never been so conflicted over a television show in terms of just an adaptation. And I do wonder how they're going to do it. With Lestat not being the rock star, will they breeze over the vampire Lestat? Will they breeze over his life and story? Will they use the other books? They are adapting the Mayfair Witches, and actually that is looking very promising. The tone is slightly different in those books, but they still contain that gothic beauty. I wonder how they'll handle that. It'll be interesting. So, like I said, as a television show, a good 6 to 6.5 out of 10, which is a good score for me. As an adaptation of one of my favourite novels, of such a rich, vast world of beauty and suffering, Someone once said Anne Rice's books read like truth and venom, and that's a really good description. They're like bitter chocolate. You enjoy it, but there is something more to it. It's a layered thing. I do wonder how they will handle it, and I wonder where they will go with it, because I can't imagine the rock star story of Lestat being removed. I hope they don't, but by all rumours I think they will. And I wonder, and this is being really honest, if they do some more modern day sections of the story, especially with Queen of the Damned and the Vampire Lestat, how that will work in the internet age. I mean, will Lestat, instead of being a rock star, be Instagramming his shoes? Media celebrity. I don't think they'll do that. So yes, a very mixed bag and very mixed feelings. What I love about this, I love, and I actually am really enjoying this. It like I said, it's really well written. But what it's missing, I'm missing as a viewer. I'm missing certain characters. And I'm missing those characters on many levels. And I'm missing the characterization of her work and feel. So tell me what you think in the comments below.